The signal was yellow, not green. The indicator light on the magnetic lock assembly, a single LED no larger than a pinhead, glowed a persistent, mocking amber through the reinforced knuckle of the rider's glove. Yellow signified a partial magnetic flux coupling, a 70% probability of maintaining adhesion under normal driving conditions. A 30% probability of shearing off and clattering onto the asphalt of Gol Nabi Street. A 2-kilogram brick of composition B3, copper, and failed Israeli foreign policy. The target vehicle, a silver Peugeot 405, a ubiquitous car on Tehran's congested arteries, idled at the red light. Its engine emitted a low, slightly uneven thrum, a sound nearly lost in the cacophony of 1,000 other engines, horns, and street vendors. The rider, Eitan, could clearly see the target's silhouette through the Peugeot's rear window, a dark shape against the morning glare. Dr. Arash Maleki, the designated head of Project 111, Iran's clandestine weaponization directorate. The physicist who was single-handedly transforming theoretical nuclear models into a deliverable warhead. Eitan's motorcycle, a deliberately battered Honda CG125, vibrated between his legs, its single-cylinder engine painstakingly tuned to sound rough, anonymous, and on the verge of stalling. It was a mechanical ghost in a city of identical machines. He had 3.8 seconds. He had mentally timed this specific traffic light sequence for 3 consecutive days from a nearby cafe. 3.8 seconds before the cross-traffic signal turned red and his turned green. 3.8 seconds before the Peugeot accelerated away, taking the narrow operational window with it. Leah, his spotter and the mission's technical officer, was positioned 2 cars back and 1 lane over in a nondescript blue Saipa Pride, her hand hovering over the detonation trigger assembly disguised as a cheap burner phone. Her signal, a single encrypted burst transmission received by a haptic actuator in Eitan's belt, had been unequivocal just moments before. Contact. The plan, a document of 212 pages he had memorized to the letter, did not account for a yellow light. The operational manual for the Tsefa 7 limpet mine was explicit. A green indicator was the only acceptable condition for placement on a moving or potentially moving target. The protocol was clear: abort, withdraw, re-engage at a secondary location. But there wouldn't be a secondary location, not since Leah had spotted the ghost 3 days ago. Maleki's security detail, a mix of uniformed IRGC officers and plainclothes VIVAC agents, had become increasingly erratic in their routes and timings over the past week. This was not just the best chance, it was the only chance. A 30% probability of catastrophic, mission-ending failure. Eitan saw the target's head move, a glance at the driver's side mirror, a flicker of movement. Had he been seen? The target's gaze lingered for what felt like an eternity, a full half-second, then shifted forward to the traffic light. A random check, nothing more. A driver waiting for the light to change. 2.9 seconds remaining. Eitan's mind, a product of a decade of relentless training in the Kidon, the Mossad's elite assassination unit, processed the variables with machine-like speed. The fine layer of road dust on the car door, likely interfering with the magnetic flux sensor's initial reading. The slight, almost imperceptible incline of the road, which would increase the shear force on the device the moment the car accelerated. The low-frequency vibration from the Peugeot's engine, creating a micro-gap between the bomb's casing and the metal panel. He made a decision that was not in the mission briefing, a violation of protocol punishable by court-martial, had he any intention of returning to one. He pushed the Tsefa 7, the Viper 7, against the metal panel just behind the rear passenger door, the designated weak point identified from engineering schematics. instead of allowing the initial low-power electromagnet to engage and sample the surface, a process that took 1.2 seconds, he bypassed it. He applied firm, direct pressure with the heel of his hand, manually depressing the device's pressure sensor. With his thumb, he found the recessed, rubber-sealed manual override stud, a feature designed for underwater demolitions, not urban warfare. He depressed it. A solid metallic thud, a low-frequency shock wave felt more than heard, vibrated up his arm and into his shoulder. It was the sound of the primary neodymium iron boron electromagnets firing a capacitor-driven charge, clamping the device to the car's frame with over 300 kilograms of magnetic force. The indicator light flickered green for a fraction of a second, confirming a full magnetic lock, before extinguishing as the device entered its armed, low-power state. It was on. 1 second remaining. He twisted the throttle. The Honda's small engine screamed in protest as he weaved violently past a yellow taxi, mounted the curb, and disappeared into a narrow side alley filled with overflowing bins and stray cats. He did not look back. He just drove, counting the seconds, waiting for a sound that he prayed would not be the Tsefa 7 hitting the pavement. 6 months earlier, the briefing room at Mossad headquarters, deep within the Glilo Junction complex north of Tel Aviv, was cold. The air was filtered to a surgical sterility, a deliberate architectural choice to remove any scent, any warmth, any distraction from the raw data presented. On the main holographic display was a real-time satellite image of the Natanz fuel enrichment plant. It was a familiar sight to everyone in the room. But the data scrolling in amber text beside it was new, and it was terrifying. Yair, the operations case officer, stood before the director. Yair was a man constructed from straight lines and sharp angles, a former Sayeret Matkal commander who viewed the world as a series of interlocking logistical problems to be solved or bypassed. His greatest operational success was Operation Nightingale, the 2018 exfiltration of a Syrian chemical weapons engineer from the heart of Damascus, a feat that had required orchestrating 3 separate teams across 2 hostile borders and leveraging a carefully cultivated betrayal within Syrian Air Force intelligence. His greatest failure was a botched intelligence handoff in Beirut in 2020 that had cost 2 high-level assets their lives, a failure that had carved permanent lines of caution and risk aversion into his face. He pointed a laser at a small, architecturally unremarkable building on the Natanz schematic, set apart from the main centrifuge halls. "This is where it's happening," Yair said, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Project 111, the dedicated weaponization group. Our previous assessments focused on their enrichment capabilities. We were watching the wrong hand." The director, a gaunt, silver-haired man, known to his subordinates only as D, remained silent, his hands steepled before him. The silence was a command to continue, to justify the emergency summons. "For the last 5 years," Yair went on, "we have assessed that Iran's primary obstacle was not the production of fissile material, but the engineering challenges of weaponization. Specifically, miniaturization of the implosion package and the design of a reliable neutron initiator. According to our top analyst, that obstacle has now been decisively overcome." He gestured to the woman sitting at the polished granite table. Tamar was Yair's operational opposite. Where he was rigid and procedural, she was fluid and intuitive. A former prodigy from Unit 8200, the IDF's Signal Intelligence Corps. She perceived the world not as a chessboard of assets and enemies, but as a vast, interconnected web of data points, where the faintest signal could betray the largest secret. She spoke 5 languages, including a flawless Farsi with a northern Tehran accent she'd meticulously cultivated by analyzing thousands of hours of intercepted phone calls and satellite television broadcasts. Her defining achievement was uncovering a secret North Korean missile technology transfer to Syria by tracing a single, seemingly insignificant component, a specific grade of graphite epoxy composite used in re-entry vehicle heat shields. Through a labyrinth of shell corporations from Pyongyang to Damascus via Malta, she saw the patterns others dismissed as noise. The intelligence comes from our asset inside the Atomic Energy Organization of Iran, Tamar explained, her voice a calm counterpoint to the alarming data on the screen. Codename: Cassandra. 3 weeks ago, Cassandra provided a data fragment indicating a major breakthrough by the head of Project 111, Dr. Arash Maliki. He has finalized a viable, tested blueprint for a solid-core, levitated pit implosion-type nuclear device. The physics package is small enough to fit within the 1.3-meter diameter of a Shahab-3 missile's re-entry vehicle. She paused, letting the technical details sink in. Furthermore, the new centrifuge design we discovered last year, the IR-9, has proven even more efficient than we projected. It has cut their enrichment timeline for weapons-grade material by 70%. Our models, confirmed by Cassandra, show they have enough highly enriched uranium for one device right now. Maleki's breakthrough means the timeline for a deliverable, functional weapon is no longer 5 years, or even 2. It's 1 year, maybe less. The director finally spoke, his voice a low rasp. Who is Maliki? Yair clicked a button on his remote. A photograph filled the screen. A man in his late 40s, with a neatly trimmed beard, frameless glasses, and intense, unblinking eyes. Arash Maliki, PhD in theoretical nuclear physics from MIT, class of '98. His doctoral thesis was on hydrodynamic instability in spherical implosions, recruited by the IRGC's research division in 2005. He is described by Cassandra as brilliant, deeply nationalistic, and utterly ruthless. He is the program's brain, its engine, and its gatekeeper. His work is so specialized, our psychological and technical analysis indicates his removal would set back the weaponization project by a minimum of 4 years, possibly 5. He is the critical bottleneck. The director stared at the photograph, his expression unreadable. This isn't the first time we've faced this problem. Masoud Ali Mohammadi in 2010, Majid Shahryari later that same year. We cut off the heads of the Hydra, and new ones grew back, often more cautious. Yair nodded, anticipating the objection. The context has changed, sir. The Stuxnet virus bought us a decade, but they've recovered. They've learned. Their internal security, the VVAC, is more sophisticated than ever. Last year, they completed the rollout of a new citywide surveillance network in Tehran. They call it Cheshmi Koda, God's Eye. It's a network of high-definition, AI-driven facial and gait recognition cameras covering every major intersection and public space. It's integrated with their cellular tracking and license plate recognition systems. Traditional on-the-ground surveillance is now functionally impossible. Our last attempt to get close to a high-value target in Tehran, an effort to bug the office of a deputy defense minister 6 months ago, ended in catastrophic failure. The 3-man team was detected by a new acoustic sensor system monitoring the building's ventilation shafts and had to abort, leaving sensitive equipment behind. VVAC knows we are active, and they are actively hunting us. The geopolitical chessboard only amplified the urgency. Yair brought up a map of the region, dotted with color-coded icons. The environment is hotter than it's been in years. The Americans are running a high-tempo drone surveillance program out of Al Udeid, focusing on IRGC naval activity near the Strait of Hormuz. A CIA Reaper went down last month near Bandar Abbas. They claimed mechanical failure. Vivac claimed a shoot-down. The truth is irrelevant. The result is that IRGC air defense and counterintelligence are on a hair trigger. Concurrently, we have strong indications the Russian SVR is actively trying to recruit assets within the Isfahan Nuclear Technology Center, likely to gain intelligence on Iran's advanced centrifuge designs for their own use in modernizing their tactical arsenal. This has Vivac seeing foreign ghosts behind every corner. They're jumpy, paranoid, and shooting first. Any misstep we make won't be treated as a simple criminal act. It will be seen as an act of war. The P5+1 talks were in a delicate, critical phase. Any overt military action by Israel would shatter the fragile diplomatic process, isolate them internationally, and likely trigger a full-scale regional conflict. The United States, through back channels, was urging extreme restraint. But Israeli intelligence was screaming that the point of no return, once a distant theoretical point, was now visible on the horizon. A covert, plausibly deniable operation was the only viable move. It had to be a surgical strike that sent an undeniable message without offering definitive proof of its origin. It had to be perfect. What triggered this emergency briefing today? The director asked, his eyes fixed on Yair. Tamar answered, her gaze unwavering. A new message from Cassandra. It arrived 12 hours ago, relayed through our dead drop server in Frankfurt. It was transmitted via steganography, hidden within the metadata of a medical imaging file, a chest X-ray. The transmission was incomplete. The file was corrupted, likely due to a Vivac network sniffer that caused the upload to terminate prematurely. My team at 8200 has been working around the clock to reconstruct it. We recovered 2 fragments. The first part was digital noise, but the second was clear and terrifying. Blueprint complete. Trinity test simulation next month. The room went still. Trinity, the code name for the first ever atomic bomb test at Alamogordo, New Mexico. It was a term no nuclear physicist would use lightly. It was either a catastrophic misunderstanding of a corrupted signal or a clear, unambiguous statement that the end game had begun. We have to assume it's real, Yair said, his voice hard as iron. We have to assume the timeline has collapsed from 1 year to a matter of weeks. We need to activate Kaidan. We need to sanction Operation Damocles, immediately. The director looked at the picture of Arash Maleki one last time. Who do you have in mind for the field? Yair's answer was immediate, without a flicker of hesitation. Eitan and Leah. Eitan was the unit's ghost. A former professional motorcycle racer whose reflexes were measured in milliseconds and whose understanding of physics in motion was purely intuitive. He was recruited into Kaidan after an infamous training exercise where he was tasked with infiltrating the heavily guarded Nevatim Air Base. Instead of cutting through fences or disabling alarms, he spent a week observing the base's supply chain. He identified a third-party catering company with lax security protocols. He then simply bought a used catering truck, cloned its markings perfectly, and drove through the main gate at 6 a.m. with a load of fresh bread, waving cheerily at the guards who were expecting their daily delivery. He spent 6 hours inside, mapping their entire security network and leaving a Mossad challenge coin on the base commander's desk before driving out the same way. He was a master of blending in, of becoming part of the urban background noise. His operational signature was clean, quiet, and brutally effective. Leah was the artist. Her defining operation had been in Vienna 3 years prior. Mossad had identified an Austrian engineering firm, Schiller Voss, as a front for funneling high-grade centrifuge components to Iran. The target was a specific shipment of miraging steel bearings, essential for the stable operation of high-speed gas centrifuges. Direct sabotage was impossible. Leah was sent in alone, under the cover of a graduate art history student from Berlin named Anna. For 6 months, she lived the part, attending lectures at the University of Vienna, frequenting the cafes where the company's mid-level engineers drank after work. She didn't seduce a target. Her approach was more subtle. She identified a lonely, pedantic quality control manager named Gregor, a man in his late 50s obsessed with precision and overlooked by his superiors. She didn't offer him secrets or money. She offered him an audience. She listened for hours as he complained about Schiller Voss's declining standards, validating his professional pride. Over weeks, she carefully guided their conversations to the topic of metallurgical impurities, framing it as research for a paper on the aesthetics of industrial perfection. One night, working late with Gregor in the quality control lab, she accidentally spilled a vial of what she claimed was a cleaning solution onto a tray of the Iran-bound bearings. In reality, the colorless liquid contained a microscopic, engineered metallic flaw, a custom-designed crystalline structure suspended in a fast-evaporating solvent. The liquid vanished in seconds, leaving no trace. The flaw was undetectable by Schiller Voss's X-ray and ultrasonic tests. But once installed in a centrifuge and subjected to the immense G-forces of spinning at over 60,000 RPM, the bearings would develop catastrophic microfractures, causing the centrifuges to tear themselves apart. She had turned a precision instrument into a self-destruct mechanism, setting back a critical part of the Iranian program by 18 months without ever firing a shot. She understood not just the electronics, but the psychology of the technology she deployed. "They're the best we have," Yair said simply. The director gave a single, slow nod. "Then get them to Tehran, and do not fail." The plan was a study in calculated, algorithm-driven risk. Tehran was a digital fortress. Cheshire-Koda, the God's Eye surveillance system, had neutralized Mossad's traditional tradecraft. Agents couldn't follow a target's car for more than 2 blocks without an algorithm flagging their vehicle for anomalous behavior. Every face at every intersection was scanned, cataloged, and cross-referenced against VVAC databases. Yair and Tamar's plan was designed to circumvent the eye itself by never being seen by it. They wouldn't rely on fallible human surveillance. They would rely on pure data. For 3 solid weeks, Tamar and her team at Unit 8200 fed every available piece of information into a proprietary predictive analysis program codenamed Oracle. They used gigabytes of high-resolution satellite imagery to track traffic patterns, analyzed hacked municipal data on traffic light timings down to the millisecond, and even factored in prayer times from local mosques, which had a quantifiable effect on traffic flow. They cross-referenced this with fragmented intelligence from Cassandra on Maleki's work schedule and VVAC security protocols. The goal was to build a probabilistic model of Maleki's life, to find a predictable, exploitable pattern in the chaos of a city of 9 million people. After 2 weeks of non-stop analysis, burning through the processing power of a dedicated supercomputer, Oracle produced a result: a single high-probability pattern. Arash Maleki lived in a secured IRGC residential compound in North Tehran and worked at a secret research facility disguised as a telecommunications substation to the south. Every weekday, he was driven to work in one of 3 rotating silver Peugeot 405s. While his departure times varied by as much as 30 minutes, the program found a geographic bottleneck in his route. There was a 92% probability that his vehicle would have to pass through the Gol-Nabi intersection between 7:45 a.m. and 7:51 a.m. A 6-minute window. That was the kill box. The entire operation would be a gamble on an algorithm. The insertion was phased and compartmentalized to minimize risk. Aitan entered Iran first, crossing the land border from Azerbaijan at Astara. His cover was a Turkish merchant specializing in rare vintage motorcycle parts, a cover that allowed him to carry a sophisticated toolkit without raising suspicion. He traveled with a forged Turkish passport, the micro-printing on it flawless. The paper stock sourced from the same German mill used by the Turkish government and aged artificially for 6 months. He spent his first 3 days in Tabriz, establishing his cover story by making token business deals with local mechanics before taking an overnight bus to Tehran. Leah followed 48 hours later, flying into Imam Khomeini International Airport from Istanbul on a Turkish Airlines flight. Her cover was a German art student on a cultural exchange program, her backpack filled with sketchbooks, expensive charcoal pencils, and books on Persian miniatures. Her forged German passport was a work of art, containing flawlessly replicated entry and exit stamps from Italy, Spain, and Greece to lend it credibility. She passed through immigration without a second glance, even engaging the customs officer in a brief, disarming conversation in Farsi about the poet Hafez. Their rendezvous point was a pre-established safe house, an apartment in the Elahiya district, a wealthy northern suburb where foreign residents were common. The apartment was owned by a Sanctioning, a local Jewish resident who volunteered to assist Mossad out of ideological conviction. This Sanctioning was a reclusive horologist, a master watchmaker, a man so deeply embedded and respected in his community that he was considered above suspicion. But when Aitan arrived, he found the first operational complication. The building's management had, in the last month, installed a new CCTV camera in the main hallway, a Chinese-made Hikvision IP camera pointing directly at the apartment's door. It was a cheap, off-the-shelf model, but it was a digital witness they could not afford. Leah, upon her arrival, solved the problem not by jamming it, which would create a noticeable gap in the security log, but with a more elegant solution. She used a miniature device disguised as a phone power bank to perform a man-in-the-middle attack on the camera's unencrypted Wi-Fi signal. It captured a clean 30-second loop of the empty hallway, which it would then broadcast back to the security recorder whenever they needed to enter or leave. A seamless digital fiction. It was a temporary, battery-draining fix, but it would have to do. The next task was acquiring the operational assets. Aitan needed a motorcycle. Not just any motorcycle, but a Honda CG125. It was the mechanical cockroach of Iran, a workhorse vehicle that was effectively invisible. He purchased one from a second-hand dealer in the sprawling, chaotic bazaars of South Tehran, paying in cash. During his meticulous inspection back at the safe house, he discovered a critical problem. The specific model year he'd bought was known for a faulty clutch mechanism that was prone to slipping under high torque. Under the stress of a high-speed escape, it could fail catastrophically. For 2 nights, while Leah kept watch, Aitan stripped the engine down on the floor of the apartment's small tiled bathroom, using the specialized disguise tools he'd brought with him. He meticulously rebuilt the clutch assembly, replacing the stock plates and reinforcing the basket with a custom-machined part he had carried in, disguised as a heavy metal belt buckle. The technology for the mission was built on the principle of leaving no trace. The Zephyr 7 bomb was a marvel of destructive engineering. It wasn't a crude pipe bomb, it was a precision-guided shaped charge. The explosive core was 800 grams of composition B3, a more stable and powerful RDX TNT mix than standard C4. This core was set behind a precisely machined copper cone, known as an explosively formed penetrator. Upon detonation, the cone would vaporize, forming a hypervelocity jet of molten metal traveling at over 8,000 meters per second, capable of penetrating 300 millimeters of rolled steel armor. The design focused the entire blast force in a single, narrow direction, punching through the car door and killing the occupant while minimizing the blast radius. The goal was to assassinate the target, not to create a massive fireball that would kill dozens of civilians and turn a covert operation into an international incident. The magnetic locking system, the mag latch, was Leah's innovation. Standard limpet mines used powerful permanent magnets, making them noisy and difficult to attach quickly. The TZF-A7 used a dual-stage electromagnet. Stage 1 was a weak, pulsed field, just strong enough to hold the 2-kilogram device against a vertical surface, allowing the operative to place it silently. A suite of sensors, pressure, capacitive, and magnetic flux, would then determine when the bomb was flush against the surface and trigger Stage 2. A massive electromagnetic pulse from a bank of capacitors that clamped the device to the car frame with 300 kilograms of force, making it impossible to remove by hand. The detonator was a remote radio trigger, but communicating in a city blanketed by Vivac's signal hunting teams was suicide. Leah's solution was a burst transmission unit, the Chrono Burst, disguised as a cheap digital watch. When she pressed the button, it didn't send a continuous, traceable signal. Instead, it broadcast a 0.2-second encrypted data packet, simultaneously hopping across 50 pre-programmed radio frequencies in a pseudo-random pattern, a form of direct sequence spread spectrum transmission. For any eavesdropper, the signal would be indistinguishable from background radio static. Its primary limitation was its brutal simplicity. It could only send one of 3 prearranged, irrevocable signals to a tiny receiver in the bomb: arm, detonate, or disarm. There was no room for conversation, no way to communicate nuance. The final piece of technology was designed to defeat Cheshmi Koda. Getting close to Maleki was one thing. Escaping a city that was watching every license plate was another. Leah had designed a small battery-powered infrared emitter, the Shomer 3, the size of a matchbox. It attached to the motorcycle's license plate frame. When activated, it flooded the immediate area with a specific frequency of high-intensity infrared light, projecting a distorted, unreadable glare onto any digital camera sensor, especially the IR-sensitive CMOS chips used in traffic and surveillance systems. It was a cloaking device, but a fragile one. Its custom lithium polymer battery had a maximum operational life of 30 minutes. From the moment Eitan started the bike outside the safe house to the moment he dumped it at a prearranged location after the attack, he had a half-hour window. If anything delayed them, the cloak would fail, and his license plate would be broadcast to every Vivac station in the city. With 10 days in country, they needed a final systems check, not in the sterile environment of the safe house, but in the wild, a dry run. The target was not Maleki, but a random Vivac patrol car, chosen to test their systems against a hardened, aware adversary. At 2 a.m., in the deserted industrial outskirts of southern Tehran, Eitan shadowed a Peugeot Pars, the standard Vivac unmarked vehicle. Leah was a kilometer away in their rented Saipa Pride, monitoring comms and telemetry. Initiating Shomer 3 test, Eitan murmured into his throat mic. Activating now. He flicked a switch concealed on his handlebar. The infrared emitter was supposed to come to life silently. Instead, a faint, high-pitched whine emanated from the device, and a tiny wisp of acrid smoke, smelling of burnt electronics, curled up from the license plate. "Leah, we have a problem," Aitan said, his voice level, betraying no panic. "Shomer is down. I smell burning." In the Saipa, Leah's blood ran cold. On her tablet, the emitter's power draw telemetry flatlined. "Abort, Aitan. Abort now." "Get out of there." The Vivac car, 200 meters ahead, suddenly braked. Its lights went out. They hadn't seen him, but their electronic warfare suite might have picked up the Shomer's power surge as it failed. A ghost signal in the night. "Negative. They're hunting," Aitan replied, his voice tight. "I need a fix, now." "It's the voltage regulator," Leah snapped, her mind racing through the device's schematics. The custom LiPo battery must have a higher discharge rate than the spec sheet indicated. It fried the Zener diode that protects the main board. The circuit is dead. "English, Leah. What do I do?" Aitan said, keeping his speed steady, acting like a lone worker heading home. The Vivac car had pulled a U-turn and was now slowly cruising towards him. "You have to bypass it. Listen carefully. On the emitter casing, there's a small rubber plug covering the diagnostic.